Okay, hello, and welcome to week 11 of Social Science Research Methods. This week we are going to be talking about content analysis as a method. I know in the syllabus it says focus groups, but after our discussions about interviews and ethnographies, I think that content analysis might be a better method to focus on because it's very different. Whereas focus groups are very similar to ethnographies and interviews as we have discussed previously. So let's talk about content analysis. So what is content analysis? Content analysis is the categorization and analysis of tangible communication products in order to make inferences about how or why or the impact of the communication taking place. And when I say communication, I'm using that term very broadly. Oftentimes, when we as social scientists want to quickly and easily explain content analysis, we say, well, you can watch movies or television shows or pull newspaper headlines or you look at magazine advertisements. And that's absolutely true. Those are all tangible products of communication that can be collected and analyzed for patterns as part of a content analysis method. But communication can be broader than that. What kinds of communication are people using on social media? Hashtags, um, what do you call those things? Mentions and followers. How are those things working together if we're talking about Twitter or Instagram or Facebook? You could pull, we're in a census year, you could pull old census data. That's something that my family is doing as part of a genealogical project. And that is a content analysis. The census is a communication product. It is individuals in the United States or whatever country the census is taking place in communicating information about their lives and identities for the government to collect and use in policymaking. And by extension, over the last 200 years of census data being collected, the US government provides that data to its citizens publicly and freely as a way for us to better understand how we fit as one small individual in this much larger cultural population. Okay, so when will I use content analysis? Well, if you want to identify trends in communication. So, if you were interested in how President Trump's discussions or talking points about COVID-19 and masking have changed over time or how they've been covered by news outlets over time, how people respond to them on social media over time. Those are all content analysis projects looking at trends, responses, and motivations as well. That's something else that content analysis can tell us. What are the motivations behind a particular type of communication, and how are those motivations then impacting and playing out amongst the consumers of that communication? Um, when you are doing content analysis, you are looking for themes, you're looking for categories, you're looking for the tally, the frequency of how often these things show up in the data that you have collected, and keywords that come up which lead us to these themes and codes. So that you can see in this example, this is a content analysis of postings in an online forum, that these themes and codes, and those come last, right? We'll talk about that in the coding process in a second. Those come last. Those are the patterns that you're looking to name and identify to write up. Here, you can see the category that they're putting them in. So go from codes to themes, that's sort of the categorical piece of it. Number of posts, so you're tallying up the frequency to say something about how often or the relative um, frequency of particular types of communication compared to others. And then the keywords are the basic um, pieces of the original data that were mined for frequency, for theme, and eventually for code to create these patterns. So that's just one sort of basic way that you might lay out content analysis work. Okay, um, so let's look at the coding process. So you're moving from these abstract meaning units. And when we say meaning units, what we're really talking about are those individual pieces of data. So a newspaper headline, or a piece of census data, or a clip from a movie or a television show. Or a magazine advertisement. Those are all meaning units. And you're trying to move from a collection of these individual meaning units in the data set that you have created, all the way up to these themes and codes about everyday life. How are these meaning units then abstracted into arguments about the social world? And that's really what we're trying to do in coding for content analysis. Now, remember that we have talked about coding in the past in interview and ethnographic data. The coding process doesn't really change depending on the method when you're talking about qualitative methodology. You may have different approaches, whether it's grounded theory, which is where you sort of code as you go, as opposed to aggregate analysis, where you collect all of your data and then you analyze it. Um, those choices can be switched regardless of the method that you're choosing. It's simply what the data, the raw data, the meaning unit looks like that changes in these coding processes, method to method. Okay, or you can think about it like this, right? That you move from individual piece of data being collected, you try to identify a theme that comes with that particular meaning unit. You collect frequencies of those particular meaning units. You make inferences about the relationship between the frequency of inferences and the communication motivation or trend. And then you make an argument about what that means for the people who are engaged in that communication interaction. Okay, this is just a good example of a snippet of a poster about a content analysis research project on the historical use of the term ethanol and ethanol fuel as it pertains to jobs and the economy and climate change in newspapers over time. And you can see the breakdown of the frequency tables here, and the method and the purpose of the method as a really good example of how all of these things work together. Remember that I continue to say when you are dealing with qualitative methods, or even if you're thinking about doing a mixed methodological project, it's very important to make sure that your method and that your research question are in line with one another. So I would pause here, blow this up, and pay a little bit closer attention to how this project is being pulled together so you can see the relationship between those three things that we just talked about, the method and the research question and the form of the project in action. So check check that out. It'll be helpful as you are doing your final papers and exams in this class. Okay, that's all that I have for you today for our active learning exercise, our last one this semester. I'm going to ask you to use Twitter as a data source for practicing content analysis, just like all other qualitative methods. This is about practice, practice, practice. So I've left some instructions for you here about how to engage in your small scale content analysis project. Try it. Come to discussion this week and let me know how it goes, and have come with any questions that you may have about problems that came up. And I will see you guys then. Bye bye.